It's a mock draft Monday here. Joe DeLeone, Ryan Roberts. Ryan, let's get into it for this first round mock draft as we take our listeners through every single pick. The first thing we got to address, though, I think if you asked us a couple weeks ago, it would have made a lot of sense for the Titans to trade out of the first overall pick. Right now, and Jordan Ronan, who's over at ESPN, reported this on his podcast a couple days ago for the Giants, it sounds like that there's not a strong likelihood that the Giants can trade up anymore. It seems like the Titans have talked themselves into Cam Ward, which is a bit of a nice precursor for how we're going to go with this first pick.
Well, and Joe, we've talked about this. There was a conversation about free agency quarterback market versus taking a quarterback, but more importantly, trading up for a quarterback, investing a lot of capital in order to go up and get a quarterback. I am not surprised at all that maybe that trade market is not as strong as maybe some people thought it might be. I like Cam Ward. I would be willing to trade up for him potentially at the right price point, but overall, I think that we now have seen potentially that there might not be a trade, and the reason for that is that the trade market is not as strong as the value that they perceive a Cam Ward or a Shedeur Sanders to be.
Absolutely. So we're going to go with Cam Ward here as the first overall pick. It seems like that this is where things are trending. He had his visit with the Titans. They were more than ecstatic with the results and how that interview went based on just a lot of reporting that came out of that visit. So Cam Ward, easy first overall pick. I don't think anyone's going to have any qualms. Let me pitch you on this for the second overall pick as we're going to talk through each of these very quickly. I feel like as you had indicated that you had sourcing that the Browns are strongly leaning towards taking a quarterback. So I think that we should go Shedeur Sanders here with the Browns.
Yeah, that seems to be the conversation point the last couple weeks, that it's kind of trending in that direction. I mean, they obviously haven't hit the free agency market. They traded for Kenny Pickett, but that's more of a backup option, I think, a little bit more maybe of a potential bridge. So I'm okay with taking Shedeur here, and I think that's the most likely outcome as of today.
Yeah, I think that a lot of the news that came out of the combine where he was very difficult during the interviews, and he came off as very brash and hubristic. I feel like that's a lot of the teams picking in the back end of the top 10 that are trying to hope that he slides. I don't really think that's going to happen. There are awful quarterback options. And speaking of a team with awful quarterback options, the New York Giants at third overall get completely screwed out of a chance to take a QB. So where do you think with this? I kind of lean Abdul Carter, and I know that you'd have over way too many pass rushers, but maybe they can move Kayvon Thibodeau if they do this.
I would probably go Travis Hunter if it was me, just because I look at this Giants roster and I'm like, they have a need at receiver outside of Malik Neighbors if that's what you want them to do. They also have a need at corner even after free agency. I think they could still upgrade that room potentially. So I think he's a two birds, one stone type of situation potentially. And I actually do have Abdul Carter rated higher than Travis Hunter, but the way I look at it is you just invested a lot into Brian Burns last offseason and you still have holes in wide receiver and the cornerback room. So I would defer to Travis personally.
Totally fair decision to go with there, and I think I'm good with going with Travis Hunter because starting him opposite of Deonte Banks is going to create a strong secondary, and then again, as you mentioned, you can work him into the mix as a receiver. Fourth overall, this has to be Abdul Carter, right?
Yes. New England has a needed outside pass rusher. I think it makes a ton of sense. Absolutely.
Yeah, we're not going to overthink that one. This is we've discussed as one of the few guys that maybe could receive that generational description. He is so gifted and has so much potential. So him ending up at the Patriots would be a slam dunk.
I've been ringing from the mountaintops for this Jacksonville Jaguars pick, Joe. I want Mason Graham. And the reason I want Mason Graham is I think interior defensive line is a need. They have guys like Mason Smith and it's a less than ideal room, but also I think one of the biggest missing ingredients for this Jacksonville team just in general, because there's some talent on the defensive side of the ball specifically. You talk about Josh Allen, you talk about Trayvon Walker, but I think the missing need, they need a little bit of ferocity. They need a little bit of a bad edge to them. They need a guy that can be a little bit of a tone setter, and I think that is Mason Graham. I want him in Jacksonville.
Mason Graham on that defensive line with Trayvon Walker and Josh Allen would be freaking nasty. So I'm all for that one. I think that Mason Graham has not been getting a level of hype that he should be getting at this current moment. It's part of the process. The big name guys tend to kind of cool off as we start to prop up some other unexpected names and then things actually come to fruition. The Raiders got Geno Smith. They are in this position where they're trying to build in Pete Carroll's vision so that they can be competitive now, seemingly. Do we go O-line or do we go Will Johnson here?
No thoughts, Ashton Jeanty? No thoughts.
I'm not doing that. I'm not doing that. I think that it'll be considered, but I really just don't think that a team like the Raiders, who have so many other needs, are going to just blindly go and take Ashton Jeanty. I just don't think it makes sense.
I just don't think the offensive line's as big as need as a couple other spots potentially. I mean, like you can semi upgrade it, but like there's still some pretty good pieces up front. It's not like it's a barren wasteland of offensive line. I would be okay with going corner potentially if you wanted to go Will Johnson, but I do think that we should seriously think about Ashton Jeanty. Like I think that he should at least be in the conversation here. I do think he should.
I feel like the Raiders are better off, and they might approach it this way, taking a running back in the second or third round because there's just so many running back options.
Sure.
That would feel like, and also to be fair, the times that they did draft running backs and they got good running back production when he was with the Seahawks, it was mostly either end of the first round or later guys. It was Rashad Penny. It was Chris Carson. I don't know. If you really want to go Ashton Jeanty here, I can be convinced.
You can go Will Johnson. We'll go Will Johnson here. It's fine. Okay. I think he's a little bit underrated in this class. I think he's still a very good football player. I just wanted to have the Ashton Jeanty conversation because I do think he is a top 10 player in this class, and I do think that is. Dude, the Raiders averaged 3.6 yards per carry last year as a unit, Joe, and their leading rusher was like Amir Abdullah, I think, or something. It was awful, dude. It was like Amir Abdullah, Samir White. Like it was an awful running back room, and I think they needed an injection of talent running the ball.
Well, they can come back around in the second round and take Omarion Hampton or DJ Giddens or Caleb Johnson or Trevion Henry. There's plenty of options for them to address running back a little bit later on. Number 7 here with the Jets.
Yes.
They need weapons. They want to set up Justin Fields to succeed. What are we thinking here?
I want Tyler Warren, man. I feel like I keep talking about Tyler Warren, the tight end from Penn State. Joe, the last 2 times they've drafted a first-round off tight end, and it's not been great. It was Kyle Brady back in the 90s, and then it was Dustin Keller from Purdue, maybe like 10, it had to be more than 10 years ago, maybe like 12, 14 years ago, something like that. But I do think that Tyler Warren is the missing tight end that they've needed for a long time. Like it's been a while since the New York Jets have had a difference maker. And I also think that you bringing in Justin Fields, trying to figure out if he could be a guy that you invest maybe another contract into, only on a 2-year, $40 million deal. I think having that type of difference-making move tight end piece like a Tyler Warren would be great for this New York Jets offense that already has Garrett Wilson, already has Breece Hall. It has some weapons, but having a guy in the middle of the field I think could be a big help.
Panthers at number 8. Their fan base really badly wants to get an edge rusher, and there's some pretty good options on the board here for them. They could take Shamar Stewart. They could take Jalen Walker. Maybe Mykal Williams. I think that you and I are out on James Pierce Jr. going this early because of what we heard or what you heard at the combine. I'm going to push Shamar Stewart. I think Shamar Stewart would be a better fit for this team than Jalen Walker would.
Joe, I actually kind of like the Jalen Walker fit. Not that I'm like overly high on Jalen Walker, but when I look at what the Carolina Panthers need, they have needs at both inside linebacker and off of the edge. They obviously said goodbye to Shaq Thompson this offseason, so they're barren a little bit on the second level. And I think that they could potentially hit two big areas of need here, right? Like he could be a guy that in obvious pass situations could be a pass rusher off the edge, but on base downs, he's an inside linebacker. So I actually kind of like the potential of a Jalen Walker in this defense specifically.
I get that, but at the same time, I would argue that you're not solving either problem. I'm not a Jalen Walker fan. I think that you're drafting a guy who's average to below average at 2 things. But he's a really good athlete, but it doesn't translate to success that you're going to have in the NFL because he doesn't have any pass rush moves. He's just trying to out-athlete everybody, and he also doesn't have the instincts to play linebacker. But I know that this is a very common pick, though, that Jalen Walker goes with the Panthers.
Just give him Shamar Stewart then. Give him Shamar Stewart. You stick to your guns, man. Don't let me manipulate you. Take who you want.
The Saints, we could go in a ton of different directions. What are you thinking?
You know, their leading receiver last year was their tight end, Johnson. And then I think Chris Olave only had like 400 yards. I know he only played in like 8 games due to injury. But like they need wide receiver help. For whatever reason, they seem to be full go with Derek Carr. Like they're not giving up, right? Like they're not reloading. They're like, oh, well, we can do this. I promise. And I'm not sure they actually can.
I agree with you. I mean, they need receivers. I just would the slide for Ted McMillan seems to be occurring, and ninth overall seems really high for him.
So do you want to go Jalen Walker after you just talked yourself out of taking him 8th? You're okay with taking him 9th? Is that what's going to happen here?
Maybe. Is that what you want? Would you be cool with that? Would you want to go with that pick?
I would have been okay fundamentally with the Panthers taking him a pick earlier, so I'm okay with them taking him a pick now.
All right, let's do it. We'll go Jalen Walker there. 10th overall to the Bears. Pre-free agency, the argument would have been this has to be an offensive lineman. Now that we're after free agency, they spent a lot on bolstering their offensive line. And I would argue it actually maybe doesn't make total sense for them to go O-line.
Mm-hmm.
What are we feeling here? Do we think that they need to they're a team that could take an edge rusher? Do we think that they're just going to go defense? Or do they still need to build around Caleb?
It's a very interesting roster now because they got Grady Jarrett in free agency, right, to play interior defensive line. They signed Dayo Odeyingbo to go along with Montez Sweat. I mean, I think you could still upgrade edge potentially. Offensive line, like you said, I mean, they got Jonah Jackson, they got Drew Dahlman, they got Joe Thuney. They upgraded their interior, but I still think that left tackle could be an upgradable position. Not that necessarily they're going to go there. I'm going to throw you a curveball, though, here, Joe.
Okay.
Ashton Jeanty, baby. Ashton Jeanty to the Chicago Bears.
I'm good with it. I imagine Ashton Jeanty playing with that new offensive line alongside Caleb Williams with a good receiving room. I think that there is a lot of potential there. That is a sneaky one that I have not seen projected often. Luxury pick. It's a luxury pick for a team that's already addressed other positions. That's exactly what would fill that definition for this mock draft. The 49ers, I feel that they're an interior offensive line or a defensive line team.
I think they could go edge opposite of Nick Bosa. I think that is a spot that could potentially make sense. I think corner could be a spot as well after losing some in free agency. Interior offensive line, I actually don't think it's that big of a deal. I mean, like, you can upgrade it, man. Like, you can go right tackle too. I think that's an upgradable position potentially. Do you go wide receiver as well with your boy out of there now? You know what I mean?
Ted McMillan. You're saying with Debo out of there.
With Debo out, do you want to upgrade the slot receiver role? I mean, Luther Burden could make some sense in that role. I don't know. Just to kind of throw some guys out there.
We have Will Campbell on the board. Their offensive line's not awful, but I would argue it's not
to
great.
Play right tackle. You want Will Campbell to play right tackle?
Or if they want him to play him at guard, if they feel that he's a better fit at either, they can put him wherever they just need to shore up their offensive line.
Yeah, I mean, I think the ideal, if we're going to take Will Campbell, is he starts at right tackle potentially, or at least fights for the starting right tackle job with Colton McKivitz, or left guard. They are projected to start Ben Barch in at left guard, excuse me. So I think that's upgradable as well. So Will Campbell to play right tackle makes some sense.
Fixing the offensive line that's gone a little bit downhill over the last couple of years since their Super Bowl run. Will Campbell would be a steal of a pick there in the top 11 picks. The Cowboys, man, they're pissed off that they missed out on Ashton Jeanty. If Jeanty's off the board,
wide
receiver or Kenneth Grant was the other option that I was going to go with.
I think it's wide receiver, man. Look, better or for worse, they are going to squeeze every part of Dak Prescott's talent that they can until it falls completely down the rails. So I think that they need to get talent around a CeeDee Lamb. I just don't think Jonathan Mingo and Jalen Tolbert is good enough as departmentalized receivers. So Tet, Luther Burden, I think that there's some conversation with either that would make sense for Dallas.
I think it would go in with Tet here. I don't love it again. I don't think the Tet
for the size element.
Yeah, because he's a completely different prototype than what CeeDee Lamb is. So that gives them value having a big catch point guy. And I think ultimately the one thing that we've talked about with Tetero and McMillan is that he needs to be the secondary option in an offense. So do we want to go with Tet?
Yeah, we'll go with Tet. Tet, I think he brings a different type of receiver that they just don't have any of on this roster. So I'm good with that.
We got to go with Armand Membao, right? We got to go with an offensive lineman.
Yeah, dude,
the Dolphins.
They're another one, dude. I was just talking about Dak. They need to figure it out the best they can with two, or else they're looking for a complete reset in another year or two, right? So, yeah, offensive line. I think Banks is an okay pick as well. Go with Membao just because I think that Membao could play a couple different spots. And I mean, Miami just
they can evaluate. They can bring him in and then
lineman.
Evaluate to kind of see where he fits.
Absolutely. Indianapolis. Oh, man. So here's a little bit insight here, Joe. Okay. There's a little bit of insight. I know they like Tyler Warren. Tyler Warren's off the board. This is an off-the-wall pick, but a guy that I'm told that Indianapolis likes a ton. Destin Adams over at A to Z actually kind of gave me a little bit insight here. It's out in the universe, so like this isn't super secretive. They like Jahad Campbell, the linebacker from Alabama.
Well, the funny thing is that you and I have heard that there are a lot of teams that like
Jahad Campbell.
So if he comes on the board here, he snipes away from the Seahawks and the Buccaneers, who are potential options.
And here's the full transparency. I would have personally taken Malachi Starks, but this is a little bit of more of a predictive nature, and I'm up for Jahad Campbell. I don't love Jahad Campbell in this spot, to be honest. I want that to be out in the universe, but for the YouTube followers, there is some that do, in the Indianapolis building apparently, that do have a high liking to a Jahad Campbell, versatile linebacker.
Yeah, I totally agree that it feels like they have other positions that they need to address. It's the opposite of a running back where I always talk about it's a luxury pick. When you have the rest of your defense shored up is when you start to spend money or high draft picks on linebackers. But if you haven't, it's probably not the best direction to go in. But I like that thought of Campbell. You're enamored by the athleticism and the impact that he can have. And he can also be a pass rusher, being a former edge recruit. Atlanta taking a pass rusher has to be done.
Yes.
They just got rid of Grady Jarrett, which maybe they could go Kenneth Grant here, but they are so desperate to get a pass rush. They have nobody. Do we think Mykel Williams keeping him local?
I mean, it's a running joke that Atlanta doesn't draft Georgia Bulldogs. I think we end the James. I think we do the James Pierce Jr. thing, even though it might not be as likely as some people think. But I mean, it only takes one team for it to come off the board. And honestly, if you can get the best out of James Pierce Jr., he's a top 10 overall talent in this class. I know there's some volatility there, but there's some volatility to taking Mykel Williams, who has almost no college production as well, right? So I'll take the gamble on James Pierce Jr. to be a high-level pass rusher potentially in Atlanta.
Admittedly, the Cardinals have been one of my weak points in mock drafts because I just don't really know where they should attack first, because the roster is very uneven and it's not really built to succeed around Kyler Murray. I feel like their offensive line could be better, but Kelvin Banks at this point and Membell's already off the board. I don't know if I want to take a tackle here because their tackles feel like they're stronger parts of their offensive line.
Right.
Their defensive line, they don't have a premier pass rusher. Do they maybe
they just signed Josh Sweat though. They just signed Josh Sweat, right? I mean,
do we talk ourselves into Kenneth Grant here? They run a 3-4. He could play nose and he would dominate up the middle.
Do we talk ourselves into a corner here? Would be another spot that I would just kind of throw out there quickly. They're projected to start Max Melton, who I liked in last year's class, in the 2024 NFL draft class, and Sean Murphy Bunting. That's their starting corners. They got Dalvin Tomlinson in free agency. They got Josh Sweat in free agency as an outside pass rusher. Their offensive line actually isn't bad on paper, which is interesting, right? So, man, I think, Joe, that we either go interior defensive line or we go corner. Those are the two spots that I think makes the most sense.
My thing, though, if we go corner, I don't love the corner board the way that it looks right now, because I feel like Revel is not going to go as early as we would take him because of coming off of the injury. I feel like Morrison, same deal, coming off of an injury.
Do they like Jahdae Barron? Do they like Jahdae Barron?
We like him at slot, though. Do you think that they would start him outside?
I mean, I think some teams will, especially after he tested the way he did at the Combine. So I think that some teams are going to let him get an opportunity to play outside. And I don't know, man, because this Cardinals team has at least they had Byron Murphy, the corner, a couple years ago, and he was more of a zone-based outside corner as well. So they do the zone-based outside corner stuff with Jahdae Barron. I think there's some possibility there. I just look at that position. I think that's one of the biggest needs on the roster. So
all right, we'll take it. Cincinnati feels like they need to go with their defensive line. Edge rusher, or maybe this is the Kenneth Grant pick. Maybe this is the Kenneth Grant pick.
It could be the Kenneth Grant pick. Obviously, they just spent a whole lot of money on their offensive identity, but Al Golden needs to figure out this defense very quickly, Joe, right? And is Trey Hendrickson going to be there long term? Right now, they're projected to start B.J. Hill and Chris Jenkins inside. So I am totally okay if you want to go Kenneth Grant here.
Running into the podium. Kenneth Grant's still on the board. You had so many problems with the interior of your defensive line. You would have a monster in there for you. The Seahawks offensive line was incredibly mediocre. You want Sam Darnold to feel secure in this first season. We also saw When the Vikings offensive line played poorly last year, it led to poor performances by him. So we need to find some protection for him. Kelvin Banks?
Yeah, I'm good with Kelvin Banks. You can potentially compete at right tackle, or you can move him inside the left guard. I'm good with Kelvin Banks there.
All right. Buccaneers, what are we feeling?
Man, so this is a team that I think would also be in the Jahad Campbell market if he was there, but obviously he is off the board. I think pass rusher is one that makes sense, but man, here's the dilemma, Joe. I know that the Buccaneers, if they're going to take a pass rusher in the first round, want a guy that's pro ready, right? A guy that's going to come in day one and be a pass rusher for you. I feel better about Mike Green being that guy than Michael Williams. Right? Like, I feel better about Mike Green giving me pass rush upside immediately than Michael. Michael will maybe potentially be the better player long term, but there's some volatility to that, right? So Mike Green or
there's
Michael.
There's also the. I feel like we don't think that Mike Green's going to be this pick, though. For what we did a video on a couple weeks ago, immediately after the combine of the character concern issues.
Here's the issue with the report that I put out there is that I was told a few different teams were unsettled by the Mike Green past allegations, but I don't know if all 32 teams just hypothetically feel the same way, right? Like that's the blind spot to this. But I do think that he is the more ready-made, pass rusher in this spot. So actually, I think I would defer to Mike Green here.
What about Malachi Starks?
I'm okay with Malachi Starks in that spot. I think that Tampa looks at him as a versatile weapon that can play all over the place on the back end. So I would be okay with Malachi Starks personally.
Yeah, let's do Malachi Starks because I feel like there's too much deliberation, especially because Michael Williams would be the pick, but as you just talked about there, they want somebody more pro ready. So let's not overthink this. Let's go with one of the best defensive players in the class that should come off the board.
Okay.
The Denver Broncos, Colston Loveland's still on the board, or they could go receiver.
They just paid money to Evan Ingram, right? So I think
but I don't know if that deal like really screams to me that they're out of the market on a tight end. I think Luther Burden would be awesome in the slot for them with how their receiver room is already built.
Yes, I mean I'm okay with it. I know that you're a Matthew Golden fan as well, so honestly, Emeka Egbuka has some upside in that spot as well. So I actually don't think that you can go necessarily wrong with any of those three guys. I'm a Burden fan personally, but if you want to go Golden, I'm fine with that as well.
Well, let's go Golden. I think now that the Steelers got DK Metcalf, I don't think that completely takes them out of the mix to take another receiver. What are your thoughts on if we took Emeka Egbuka here to play in the slot?
I wouldn't like it unless you could predictively tell me that they're going to trade George Pickens or not. Because I don't. Metcalf and Pickens, I think, is a good enough receiver crew where I don't have to dip again first round wide receiver. Like I don't think that is necessarily a spot that I would potentially go in. I think a couple spots, interior defensive line, I think is interesting. I think that is very interesting depending on how you view that, and I think.
They need a nose because they run a 3-4. So do we think that
I actually think they can go a versatile guy because they still have Keanu Benton. I think they could go Derek Harmon because right now they play a 3-man front. Dean Lowry's projected to start at one defensive end spot, and Cam Hayward, who's getting older, is the other guy. So I think a Derek Harmon could make a lot of sense there. Yes.
All right, we're gonna go with Derek Harmon. He's got the frame to play nose, or he could play that 3-4 defensive end role because he's got the length to play it. The Chargers taking Colston Loveland is like the laziest, easiest pick. Should we just do it?
They didn't pick up any tight end in free agency, did they? I don't think they did. No, they didn't.
No.
Yep. Yeah. Take Colston Loveland.
All right. Boom. Yep. Easy. Done. Taking a corner seems inevitable with the Packers. Do we want to talk ourselves into one of these dudes on the board?
I mean, I would be okay with Siobhan Revell, man. Like, I really would. I mean, Yes. Yeah, let's do it. Yeah, let's do it.
I feel like his projection's a little volatile, though. I wonder if he goes as early as we hope because he's so freaking gifted. But then there's that world where he slides a crazy amount because of the injury, and then we're just kind of wondering why he's still there in the third round.
I don't think he'll drop that far. I think it's an early second round player, potentially the latest that he'll drop. But the other guy that would have been interesting is like Maxwell Hairston. Like that's the only other one with the rise that he could have after running really fast. But I like Revel, and I like Harrison actually as a player a lot too. But I do prefer Revel in a vacuum comparative to the others.
With all the guys on the board for the Minnesota Vikings, how do you feel about getting another pass rusher opposite of Dallas Turner, or is there another position that you think you see with these guys on the board? Actually, the other option, Nick Emenwari, is kind of staring me down there at the bottom of this list.
Nick Emenwari is very interesting because Harrison Smith's coming back for another year, but I don't think it's going to be much longer after that. And they have a couple outside pass rushers. Like they have Andrew Van Ginkel. They have Jonathan Greener. They upgraded interior defensive line. Offensive line is in a good spot now. So, yes, I would be very okay with going and Nick Emenwari to be the heir apparent to Harrison Smith, but maybe start next to him in 2025.
That is a crazy line of progression to go from Harrison Smith to Nick Emenwari. Talk about a freaking upgrade. And then also he gets to learn in a defense that's got a great defensive coordinator with Brian Flores. Texans, they have to draft a lineman, right?
I mean, they have to. I mean, what other option do they have? They just said goodbye to the all-pro left tackle, and I know Kenyon Green wasn't great for them, but like you're still replacing a couple offensive linemen out front. So yeah, offensive tackle. Who's the best offensive tackle that we're picking from right here?
Josh Simmons.
Oh yeah, dude, I would have taken Simmons earlier. So yes, Josh Simmons I think is a perfect fit.
All right, he's gone. He's off the board. Your Los Angeles Rams, the team that you root for.
I own them. I own them, actually. Yes.
Oh, okay. What direction are you leaning? What do you want?
So, I actually think that even though the Cooper Kupp thing was kind of a negative or a black eye for some people, I do think that they recovered, obviously, with Devontae Adams. I think the wide receiver room's in decent spots. Offensive line's actually pretty good, right? Like, I don't think the offensive line needs to be upgraded a ton.
Well, they moved Jonah Jackson. They moved Jonah Jackson, so maybe he was a backup. Tyler Booker. Oh, okay.
He lost his starting spot to Bo Limmer. Like that's a good point. He was a backup in LA. So I think outside corner is a spot that I'm looking at in a big way, or a linebacker. I don't think there's a linebacker necessarily I would take here. I am cool with taking Maxwell. Azariah Thomas. He's kind of screaming at me a little bit. He feels like he would be the Rams type.
I would take Azariah Thomas over Maxwell Hairston.
Fine, let's go Azariah Thomas then. That's fine.
Okay.
Yeah, let's do that.
All right. Baltimore Ravens, who man, is it Michael Williams? Michael Williams still on the board here at pick 27?
Yeah, even though pass rusher is not necessarily the biggest need for the Baltimore Ravens, I think that the fact that Michael Williams is there is a value pick for them. Yes.
Now we come up on the Detroit Lions, and you've said this multiple times, them taking Scourton if he's still there. I think we just need to keep things simple here and go with the super physical, aggressive edge rusher.
I think you go with Mike Green opposite of Aiden Hutchinson.
Really? Are you sure? You're the one who's put the Scourton pick into the ether multiple times.
I have, but I mean, I think that Scourton could go late first round, but I do think that there is, there's a possibility he could slide to the second. I'm actually okay with either spots. I think that there is a need to upgrade the pass rush. You could argue that Mike Green gives you that more quickly, but if you're talking about like an all-around player, then sure, Scourton has more upside long term. So
I'm making the pick for Scourton. I'm going with Scourton.
Do it.
Washington Commanders need pass rushers, need to improve their defense a little bit, or they could go O-line.
Man,
Tyler Booker's still on the board.
Tyler Booker is still on the board. They have an injury to Sam Cosmi they're dealing with, right? Nick Allegretti is their starting left guard. They could upgrade either one of those spots. Interior defensive line could be a spot, but
I don't love the options at interior defensive line, admittedly.
All right, so I think it's a pass rush or it's Tyler Booker, your pick. It's Mike Green or it's Tyler Booker. That's a tough one, right? It's pretty tough.
Yeah, why don't we, knowing how bad their defense got cooked against the Eagles, that they need to make their defense better. So let's go with Mike Green. You get a better pass rusher, somebody who hopefully is productive right off the jump.
Yes.
Buffalo Matthew Golden, I'm like that one's catching my attention immediately.
Go do your thing, man. You can cook. They just gave Khalil Shakir a big contract, though. They just gave him a big contract.
Yeah, man. Yeah, I'm sure that's going to really keep him away.
They signed Joshua Palmer as well. They have Keon Coleman year 2. I'm just talking out loud, man. You
named one receiver with upside, Keon Coleman, and the rest of those guys are fine. There's third, fourth options. We need to get a true number 2, Matthew Golden.
At least I'm not knocking them a linebacker in the first round like some people I know.
Oh, screw you.
It could be worse. It could be worse.
Tyler Booker, the fact that the Chiefs just got rid of Joe Thuney.
Yeah, I mean, because right now they're projected to start Kingsley Suamataia inside at left guard. So, I mean, do we want a Tyler Booker, Creed Humphrey, Trey Smith wall on the inside? Like, that sounds kind of fun to me. Sounds kind of fun.
That'd be a rich getting richer type of a. They also would be a team that too would take Walter Nolan too. I feel like.
You think? Man, I'm not as. I mean, yeah, they don't really care about off the field stuff, do they?
Right. We're going with Booker.
Yeah, let's go with Booker. That's an impending I mean, they still don't have any tackles, but or left tackle, I should say, but they have a great interior offensive line at least. So there you go.
All right, last pick of the first round, the Philadelphia Eagles.
Right.
Their roster is pretty built out, but they just lost Josh Sweat.
They lost Josh Sweat. It's an interesting conversation about the starting corner opposite of Quignon, whether they're going to move Cooper DeJean to outside corner or not. They could go outside pass rusher as well, like you said. Tight end is a conversation people are having because Dallas Goedert might be on the trade block, but there's not a tight end there now. So you want to go edge? You want to take best pass rusher? Oh.
Princely Umamielen would be the one that would make the most sense because they are super traits focused when they draft edge rushers.
They are, and Princely is like the ultimate wild card of a pass rusher and a guy that in that Philadelphia Eagles locker room, I think would be an interesting addition because I think that he is the type that could do well with being around a lot of great veterans. You know what I mean?
Right.
So
that was our full first round mock draft. People, let us know in the comments below. What do you think? How did we do? Who did we miss? Who should have been in the first round? Who maybe did we take too early? Let us know in the comments below. Hit that like button and subscribe. We'll talk to you later.